If you want beautiful plants in your home that last longer than a few months, then you need light. Not water, not soil, and not fertilizer. Light is the biggest factor when it comes to plant success.
The problem is most of our homes just don't have enough of it, which is why our plants end up looking miserable.
That's where grow lights come in. They've allowed me to grow healthy plants in spots that would otherwise never work.
The thing is, you can buy the best grow light in the world and still get terrible results if you use it wrong. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how grow lights actually work, the biggest mistakes people make, and how to choose the right one for your setup.
This is all about real life setups in real homes, not setups that look like you're running a nursery.
Now this video is sponsored by Sansancy. They asked me to include a comparison with another popular brand, and I agreed on the basis that it will be a completely honest review covering both the strengths and the weaknesses of both. So they've had absolutely no say on the content of this video. So let's start with why grow lights are so useful in the first place.
Plants want as much light as you got to offer, and the best spots are next to south-facing windows if you're in the northern hemisphere. The problem is there are only so many plants that can fit there, right? Unless you go completely overboard and cram your conservatory full of shelving.
In reality, we want plants where they actually look good, where they will brighten up a space and complement a room.
Take this corner of my living room for example. It would look naked and boring without a few plants on the console table, but it's about 5 meters from the nearest window at least, so anything here would seriously struggle.
And even if you've got a plant sitting on a windowsill, it still might not be enough. Not all windows are created equal. North-facing windows are just not bright enough, especially for tropical plants. And then there's winter. Daylight shrinks to about 8 hours around here, and most tropical plants throw the mightiest of sulks.
This is where grow lights come in to save the day. They stop your plants catching seasonal affective disorder and gets them through the spring in one piece. But it's not quite as simple as just buying a grow light and sticking it anywhere.
The first thing most of us care about is that it doesn't look ugly. We've all seen those setups with massive panels hanging from the ceiling like they're growing some type of exotic herb.
Most of us just want a few plants to look great in our home, not a full-on grow room. And we don't want the light to distract from that. That's a big part of why I choose the lights I do.
But they also need to actually do the job. There's nothing worse than buying a grow light, paying for it up front, paying to run it, and it does absolutely nothing to the plant. Either it's not strong enough or it's not giving off the right kind of light.
And honestly, the quality of light probably matters more than raw strength. Plus, they also need to be adaptable, because once you catch the plant bug, who knows where it ends? I didn't think I'd be growing cucumbers a couple of years ago, and now I've got grow lights sat right above them.
The biggest mistake I see, and one I made myself, is going cheap. My first grow lights were from some random brand on Amazon. I used them for months thinking that they were doing something, but it turns out they were pretty much doing nothing. So that's when I switched to Sansancy, but we'll come on to that in a bit.
The thing with cheap lights is you're not just sacrificing performance, you're sacrificing longevity as well. They don't last and you end up replacing them anyway. I'm not saying you need to spend a fortune for your living room, but going that extra step in quality makes a big difference.
Then there's the type of light that they give off. You'll see those purple lights and think that they look quite cool, but they're not really what we want for indoor tropical plants. Those lights are designed to target specific things like flowering or fruiting. But for most houseplants, that's not the goal.
You're much better off with a full spectrum light, so basically a natural looking white light. So let's get into the nitty gritty of how to actually use grow lights properly, because this is where most people go wrong. Placement and distance are everything. You want the light close enough that the plant actually kicks into growth, but not so close that you end up doing something like this. It's not the end of the world, but I did lose a couple of leaves from having the light too close. From my experience, about 20 centimeters or 8 inches is a good starting point. It will depend on the plant and the light though. Smaller bulbs like this 10-watt Sansancy one tend to focus the light into a narrower beam, so keeping plants around 20 to 30 centimeters away works well. The bigger 36-watt bulb spreads light over a wider area, so I use that where plants are further away, more like 60 centimeters or about 2 feet.
My advice is to treat it as a bit of a trial and error. Start on the safe side, see how the plant responds, and then adjust the distance from there.
Now the angle of the light is more important than you might think. The key thing to remember is that we're trying to mimic the sun as much as possible. For me, that means angling the light down onto the plant rather than having it directly overhead.
I'm not a big fan of those lights that sit straight above. It doesn't really mimic nature, and you tend to get slightly awkward growth with all the leaves pointing straight up. Angle the light instead, and you get that sweet spot where the leaves face out into the room and actually look good.
Now, I've not always been able to do this. This shelf, for example, is just too high, but it still seems to be working out well. On this shelf, I've got 2 floor lamps, one with a Sansancy bulb and one with a Sulttech bulb, and this is what I'll be using for the comparison in a minute. But before that, let's talk about duration, because there's a big mistake people make here, leaving the lights on for too long. It's tempting to leave them on for 24/7 to try and turbocharge growth, but that actually backfires. The plant just gets exhausted.
Again, we're trying to mimic nature, roughly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness, give or take. Plants need that night cycle just as much as they need the day cycle. It's basically when they recharge.
So aim for 12 hours a day as a baseline, and you can push it up to about 16 if needed, but no more than that.
As I've already mentioned, I generally use Sansancy for my grow light needs, but when they reached out and asked me to compare them to any brand of my choice, I was really intrigued to see how they would compare against the Sulttech grow bulb.
They're a popular brand and a bulb I've never tried before, so 3 months ago I set one up on the other end of the shelf as a direct comparison to the Sansancy on the other side. Now on paper, they're actually quite different.
The Sulttech Vita is about 20 watts, whereas the Sansancy bulb is 36 watts. So straight away you got quite a big difference in power.
And in simple terms, more power usually means more usable light getting to the plant. The Sansancy also pushes out a higher amount of usable light overall, what growers call ppf, which basically just means how much light the plant can actually use for growth. But specs only tell part of the story.
The Sulttech is available in 2 beam angles, a narrow 36 degree and a wider 60 degree. So you can choose whether you want to focus the light tightly or spread it out a bit.
The Sansancy, on the other hand, is more of a fixed setup with about a 60-degree spread, but it uses a lens to really concentrate that light down onto the plant rather than letting it spill everywhere. And this is where you start to notice the real-world difference. The Sulttech feels more like a regular household bulb that happens to help plants. It gives off a really nice warm light, looks great in a lamp, and blends into the home really well. The Sansancy feels more like a tool. It's not trying to hide what it is. It's brighter and a bit more intense and much more focused on getting light to the plant.
Another difference is lifespan and build. Sulttech say that their bulbs are designed to last around 7 years of typical use, which is solid. Sansancy rate theirs a bit differently, which is around 25,000 hours, which works out at roughly 5 to 6 years if you're running them for about 12 hours a day.
So in terms of lifespan, they're actually quite similar. Sulttech is rated to last slightly longer. Where things start to differ a bit more is warranty and support.
Sansancy offer a longer warranty and tend to just replace the bulb if something goes wrong rather than repairing it. And that's something I always like to consider, because these are things that you've got plugged in for 12 hours a day every single day, and you want to know you're covered if anything does go wrong. So after running both of these for the past 3 months, here's what I've noticed.
The first thing is the colour of the light. The Sulttech gives off a much warmer, softer light. It looks much more like a regular household bulb, so it blends into the room really nicely. The Sansancy is a bit cooler and a bit brighter. It feels more like daylight, so it stands out a bit more, but you can actually see your plants really clearly under it. And this comes down to what you prefer. If you want something that looks subtle and doesn't draw attention to itself, the warmer light is probably going to suit you better. But if your main goal is healthy growth and being able to properly light your plants, the cooler, brighter light tends to do a better job. The Sulttech tends to spill a bit more light into the room, not massively, but you do notice it. It spreads the light out a bit more, whereas the Sansancy feels a bit more focused. More of that light is actually hitting the plant rather than everything around it. And because of that, my plants do seem just that bit happier under the Sansancy. You can see it in how this philodendron is presenting its leaves towards the light. I'm not quite getting the same response on the other side. Now that's probably not just down to the spill. The Sansancy is also a more powerful bulb, so that will be playing a part as well. It would be interesting to see how Sulttech compares if they had something closer to 30 watts, but at the moment they don't.
I get a lot of comments about how much heat these bulbs give off, and I have to say that both of them do a really good job of keeping the heat down.
These have both been on for hours and I can still touch them quite easily. They're warm but not hot. I have noticed the smaller 10-watt Sansancy bulbs do run a bit hotter though, so you'll want to be a bit more careful with those and not have them too close to the leaves. That warmth is actually part of how these are designed to work. Instead of trapping heat inside the bulb, it's pulled away from the LED chips and released through the surface, which helps keep the internals running efficiently over time. One of the most important things for me with both of these bulbs is that they fit into standard fixtures that will support the wattage. These gooseneck grow lights do have their place, but let's be honest, they're not the nicest thing to look at. With these bulbs, you compare them with a lamp that actually suits your space, and most people wouldn't even realise they're grow lights. But something that clinches it for Sansancy for me is this remote control. The Sansancy bulb has smart features that allow you to have it on a timer so you're not turning it off and on every day. You can just set it, forget it, and that's super useful.
Now when it comes to cost, there are two things to think about, the upfront cost and the running cost. And something that surprised me is that the Sulttech Vita is around double the price of the Sansancy 36-watt bulb, and it's less powerful. Plus, you can use my discount code for a 25% discount off all Sansancy products by following the link in the description and scanning the QR code.
In terms of running costs, Sansancy will be slightly more expensive because it's higher wattage, but both are LEDs, so they're still relatively cheap to run. So who are these for? I'd say Sulttech probably has the edge when it comes to aesthetics. They've clearly put a lot of effort into making their lights look great in a home. They've got a great range of lights that look great on their website, whereas Sansancy are much more focused on performance. For me though, once you put the Sansancy 36-watt bulb into a lamp that suits your space, there's a clear winner. Check out all their details in the description to this video and use my code for a 25% discount at checkout.